Starting us off today, Lady Deathstrike is often brought up when talking about Wolverine haters. Her father was Lord Darkwind. Darkwind was the creator of the adamantium bonding process used by Weapon X to transform Logan into the living weapon Wolverine. Though Yuriko Oyama at first hated her father and wished to gain vengeance for his scarring of her and her brothers, Yuriko would have a change of heart after the passing of her lover, and she then embraced her father's legacy and ideals. Increasingly unbalanced, Yuriko sought to track down anyone she felt had dishonored her father and restore both his and Japan's honor. She planned to find Bullseye at first, whose spine had been bonded with adamantium, but her search led her to Wolverine instead. She reasoned that the process used to create Wolverine was a theft of her father's theories, and therefore was a form of dishonor against her father. Unfortunately for her, she was very swiftly defeated by Wolverine and Vindicator of Alpha Flight. Teaming up with Spiral of the Mojoverse, they used the resources of the Body Shop to transform Yuriko into Lady Deathstrike, a cyborg with an adamantium skeleton, and of course, her 12-inch adamantium nail claws, which are terrifying. Now, as basically a killing machine, she would hunt down and come into conflict with Wolverine many times. While her and Wolverine would have brief moments of peace here and there, her affiliation with the Reavers and her unbalanced mind usually brought her back into conflict with Logan and the X-Men. Next up, Ogun was introduced in Kitty Pryde and Wolverine #1 as a ninja who would become a mentor and even a pseudo-father figure to Wolverine, training Logan in how to balance his human side and animal side in order to become a great warrior. Unfortunately, through a mix of magic and psychism, Ogun used a technique that recreated his whole existence in a psychic form that he would then use to take over another's body in order to cheat death, which is what he intended to do to Wolverine before Logan left. Now, years later, he took Kitty Pryde under his wing and tried to do the same thing to her before she was saved by Wolverine, who took Ogun's life in the process. But since Ogun couldn't really be defeated by traditional means, he came back with a vengeance against Wolverine that has carried on for a long time. Kenichiro Harada was born as the illegitimate son of the Japanese crime lord Shingen Harada, head of the traditional and influential clan Yashida in Japan. Now, as a mutant with the ability to generate an energy field channeled through inanimate objects, he mastered the skills of the samurai, and to settle the debts of his father, he worked for various criminals, bringing him into conflict with heroes like Daredevil and, of course, Wolverine. It wasn't until Lord Shingen was laid low in combat against Wolverine that Silver Samurai vowed revenge against Logan. His father's passing was then followed by his sister Mariko Yashida assuming control over Clan Yashida, and then she immediately removed Clan Yashida from criminal affairs. But what really drove Kenichiro crazy was that Mariko had her heart promised to her father's killer, Wolverine, and they were gonna get married, much to the Silver Samurai's rage. Now, it's important to note that he would actually turn things around and become both a hero and even a friend of Wolverine eventually, but he had more than a few reasons to really hate Wolverine. The X-Men villain Magneto is a tricky foe for Wolverine. Wolverine does, after all, have a buttload of metal in his body, and Magneto does have control over that metal. Despite the fact that Magneto has all the power to completely oppose and destroy Wolverine, he apparently does actually consider Wolverine to be one of his greatest enemies. During Fatal Attractions, he calls Wolverine his most visceral enemy, his most respected foe. He then proceeds to rip the adamantium right out of his body. Now, I don't know for a fact that Magneto actually hates Wolverine, but I have a strong belief that you have to hate a guy to rip the metal coating right off of his bones while quoting Prometheus. And then, as Logan is literally on the ground, he calls him a fool to Professor X. Yeah, I think Magneto hates that man. William Stryker was a soldier in the US military deeply connected to the Weapon X program and, more specifically, to the process that created Wolverine, among others. However, sometime after his retirement from the military, Stryker had a bit of a change of character regarding his role and purpose in the world. William Stryker ended up having a son, only it turned out his son was born different than others, and Stryker knew immediately that this child was a mutant. He could not abide by that, and in what is probably up there as one of the darkest X-Men moments in comics, Stryker took the life of his entire family and even attempted to take his own life as well. Obviously, he failed at that last one, and he concluded that God must have prevented him from taking his own life so that he could serve God on Earth, which is a pretty messed up justification, but we are dealing with a villain here, so there you go. Stryker's belief was that God allowed his son to be born a mutant so that he would be guided towards his true calling. calling, which in his eyes was to lead the war against all mutants. He created the Purifiers, with his hatred of mutants being based on a belief that they represented the devil's corrupting influence on the world, and in order to save the world, mutants must just all perish. Even the one he basically helped create, Wolverine. While classified as a mutant, the Enforcer known as Roughhouse was believed to be descended from the Asgardian native rock trolls, but he could also just be a god, a giant, or a troll. Whatever he was, he met Wolverine in Madripoor in Wolverine Volume 2 number 4 when Wolverine was going by his Patch persona. Working as an enforcer for the crime lord General Koi got Roughhouse many run-ins with Patch/Wolverine that left the guy pretty extremely worse for wear, and he never forgot those beatings dished out by the X-Men, especially because it led to his employer quite literally selling him to the villain Geist as a guinea pig. So accordingly, years later in Wolverine Volume 2 number 123, after Wolverine had been stripped of his adamantium, he was ambushed by Roughhouse and his partner at the time, Bloodscream, who then knocked him unconscious and continued to do so repeatedly at their hideout until Wolverine inevitably escaped. During the Cold War, the mutant known as Arkady Rossovich was forced into a Soviet version of the Weapon X program in order to become a Russian super soldier. Arkady's mutant powers were both a healing factor like Wolverine and Sabretooth, and a unique ability known as Death Spores. Arkady could produce spores from his body that essentially took people out, and he did this a lot, basically becoming a serial killer. This put him into the ranks of some of the most despicable villains around, but once he was captured by the KGB and placed into the program, he was given cybernetic enhancements made out of carbonadium, a metal that was more malleable than and almost as strong as adamantium. These enhancements made Arkady a much more capable killer, but the carbonadium was also incredibly toxic, so much so that he required a carbonadium synthesizer to survive without having to feed off others. This is where Wolverine comes in, as him and the rest of the Weapon X team stole the synthesizer. Ever since then, Omega Red has hunted down the members of Team X to try and get it back. Eventually, Wolverine was able to finish off Omega Red with the Muramasa blade, but he was soon resurrected by the Hand, so now he has even more reasons to hate Wolverine. Wolverine and the longtime X-Men villain Mystique have history, which makes sense. They have both been around for a long time, with us not even knowing when Mystique was actually born. They hate each other. They care for each other. They try to wipe one another out. They work together sometimes, but generally though, they just try to stay away from each other. Although the two occasionally team up, whenever they do fight, you can be sure that neither of them will be holding back. Case in point is their fight from Wolverine Volume 3 number 62 to 65. The story follows Wolverine, who was sent by Cyclops to get rid of Mystique permanently. Wolverine tracks her to Afghanistan and they have an incredibly brutal fight which ends with Mystique telling Wolverine to take her out, and instead he basically says that she has no friends, that she will die alone, and tells her to do it herself. As for the history I mentioned, these two did have a relationship. Established in the same issue titled Get Mystique, the two met in Mexico back in the day and traveled together well into the 1930s running a gang. Wolverine sold out the gang with most members biting the dust, but Mystique got away. They met up sometime later while stowing away on a train where he claimed that he just stabbed her in the back before she could do it to him, which is great reasoning I guess. But Mystique also had a part in sending Wolverine's soul to hell and having his body taken over by a demon. Now, while she did apologize for that one, the people who organized that whole series of events most certainly did not apologize, and probably even felt justified. They were a group called the Red Right Hand. The Red Right Hand was created by people whose lives had been tragically affected by Wolverine in some way or another. Through the years, the founder of the group, who was known only as the Founder, recruited several members who likewise had a personal vendetta against Wolverine. One member who believed Wolverine was responsible for the passing of his wife and firstborn made a deal with a demon to join the Red Right Hand if the demon possessed the body of Wolverine, which is why we got Hellverine. And that's where Mystique came in, helping to lure Wolverine into the back of a van where the Founder called the demon to do its thing. Hellverine then decided to track down each of Wolverine's friends and family to take them out one by one. But that just leads me to my next point. One of the members of the Red Right Hand was Wolverine's own son, Daken. Now, it's important to note that Daken isn't technically a villain anymore, and even when he was one, he was more so just misled into being one, but he certainly hated his pops. Daken, or Akihiro, was the son of Wolverine and his Japanese wife, Itsu. Unfortunately, Itsu lost her life to the Winter Soldier who was trying to draw out Wolverine. This is when the villain Romulus took Daken from his mother and brought brought him to his adoptive family. When that went incredibly badly, Romulus then made Daken believe that Wolverine was the one who ended Itsu's life, and he helped mold the boy into an incredibly deadly dude. Daken and Wolverine would fight many times, and all of them were incredibly brutal, especially when Daken teamed up with the Red Right Hand, and together turned Wolverine's other children into enforcers called the Mongrels, and had Wolverine take them all out. Things have turned around for Akahiro, but it took quite a while. There you go, 10 Wolverine haters. Thank you guys so much for watching today on Top 10 Nerd. I'm your host, Adam Andrews. I will catch you on the flippy flop, so stay safe and peace out, nerds.